Hello, welcome to another story time. Today is, what is today? The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. Um, what a great story. And it's been a while since I've read the book, so I'm going to have to do my best to tell you the story. So let's get her started. So you can see the year that The House on Mango Street was published. So a relatively newer novel. It's a great novel. It's not too long either. If you get a chance, you should read it. It's written by Sandra Cisneros. You see her birth year, so she's still around, still writing. Something else I was going to tell you about the book, but I can't remember. The themes that I want you to think about as we're going through the story. Certainly race, most of the characters in the book are Mexican Americans. And so that's going to be important. We don't really see a lot of books like this. At least we don't in public schools anyway, so hopefully this is interesting for you. Some of the themes that we need to, that will be talked about is identity and finding out who you are and the sense of belonging to a place. I'm not sure these are related, but they must overlap a little bit. Like, I'm not sure how you can belong to a place if you don't know who you are, So there's that. The issue of poverty and the American dream all kind of mixed together, what this means, what's symbolized, and the idea of getting out of this, breaking out of poverty and the bad situation that you think you're in. And this kind of gets to this concept of flight, of, flying out, getting out. So think about all of these things while we're going through the story. And again, I'll try to tell you only the story and not diverge into other things, but who knows if that's going to happen. The main character, the person telling the story, is Esperanza. She lives in a house on Mango Street with her parents, her two brothers, and her sister. The beginning of the book, they talk about how they end up at this house. It's not the best house. There's only one bedroom and one bathroom. But because, let's see, the last apartment that they lived in, the pipes broke or something like that, and the white owner of the apartment complex didn't want to fix them. So Esperanza talks about her dream house, and the house on Mango Street is anything but their dream house, but it's a step up because they own it. They don't have to rely on someone else to keep it nice. So Esperanza sees the house as better than what they used to live in, but it's just a step forward to the dreams that she has for herself and for her family. She talks about the hair of all the people in her family, how she doesn't like her hair. There's really not a lot about herself that she likes. Her hair is one of them. She really likes the hair of her mother. She says it smells like bread, and she'll cuddle up and sleep next to her mother just so that she can smell her hair. So again, as we think about identity, like, are there these physical attributes that are important as well? In the neighborhood on Mango Street, the boys and girls are not really allowed to talk to each other, and so there is this cultural divide between boys and girls, which is going to be important throughout the story. And so that means the girl that she really talks to is her sister a lot, and she kind of resents her sister because she's also responsible for her sister. So they have to hang out, and she has to take care of Neely. She says all she really wants, Esperanza, all she really wants is a friend, a good, true friend. And that without one, and I love this turn of phrase that Cisneros uses, without this friend, she feels like a red balloon tied to an anchor. Like there's no hope. And this kind of leads into a discussion of her name. She doesn't like her name, Esperanza. She says in English, Esperanza means hope, and in Spanish, it means a word with too many letters, which is kind of funny, but it also means sadness and waiting, which seems to be, as we will go through this story, is what Esperanza is all about. She seems to be waiting and she seems to be sad most of the time. Or maybe she's full of hope. We'll see. She says she's named after her great grandmother, someone she's never met, um, and they both were born in the Chinese Year of the Horse, and that meant they were supposed to be strong women. But Esperanza knows this is not true because both Chinese and Mexican culture look down upon strong women, that they kind of put women in their place. And so already, as a kid, Esperanza knows like the cultural and societal constraints that have been placed upon her simply because she's a woman. Her great grandmother was forced into marriage. She resented her husband because she was forced into it and didn't love him. And she would just sit by the window and listen to music and things. And Esperanza was afraid this would happen to her, that she did not want to have her place by the window. She called it just watching the world go by without actually participating in it. That's the last thing that Esperanza wanted. And she talks about how she wants to change her name to Zizi the X. And again, so Esperanza is a great character, and she's kind of funny at times as she's growing up. And at the beginning, she's especially funny and whimsical sometimes. So the first friend that Esperanza really has in the neighborhood is Kathy, who says that Kathy claims that she is related to the Queen of France, and that someday she'll go back to France and be called back to France somehow. She agrees to be friends with Esperanza for a week. Let's see what happens. She talks about all the people in the neighborhood, and we'll get to know some of them, and talks down upon them about them like there isn't anyone that she likes in the neighborhoods. And she says the neighborhood is in decline because families like yours are moving in to Esperanza. Oh, okay. Two other friends she meets, Lucy and Rachel, and they put together their money to buy a bike that they share, and they ride around the neighborhood, and they talk a little bit about what the neighborhood looks like and all that. It's just kind of a nice, interesting friendship type of thing. But Esperanza feels embarrassed, and she feels embarrassed a lot because of who she is, and especially since she took the money from her sister to buy the bike and has to have her sister around all the time, feeling like things are weighing her down. And that becomes a theme as well. Are there things that are weighing her down? Like the lack of friendship was like an anchor, and now her sister. There's a junkyard that the girls go to where the owner only turns the lights on if he thinks the customers have money. And so it's kind of a humorous scene kind of humorous and tragic scene that these girls are wandering around the junkyard looking for things to purchase in the dark. It's not really a junkyard. It's more like a secondhand / junkyard thing. Neely finds a Statue of Liberty that she purchases. And I love this, that the Statue of Liberty means so much to this little girl. And she has such little money, though. This is what she wants to purchase. And I think this, for us Americans who might have no concept of what it's like to be an immigrant, or even someone who doesn't feel like they belong, to have something like the Statue of Liberty as a symbol. So I think that's an important thing here to show how important the ideas of the Statue of Liberty are to this family. There's a music box that is also in the secondhand store, a wooden box, and the girls always wondered what it was, and so they ask the guy, the owner, what it is, and he says it's a music box, and he opens it up, and Esperanza is taken back by the emotional connection that she has to the music, and she doesn't think that she would have reacted like this, but she does. And they ask how much it was, and the owner says it's not for sale. And so I think this kind of opens up that there's also, even though this guy runs a junkyard or a secondhand store or whatever, there are some deeper things within their souls that might be important that we might not see. Um, we can skip over Juan. I think Juan's just is a son um, um, of a family that moves into Kathy's house. And well, no, let's just talk a little bit about it. And there's someone else that moves into the house as well, obviously to help pay for the things that the families need. And Juan breaks his arm trying to, I forget if he was climbing a tree or something, but he falls and breaks his arm. And this begins like a common theme again that we talked about, this idea of flight, of trying to get out. And there's so many examples of people in this story trying to get out of the neighborhood who can never make it. And certainly this is the first one. And also here's another family in Meem's basement, Louis and Marin. Oh, no, yeah. So Meem and Juan move into a house, and it used to be Kathy's house. Kathy has moved on. Louis and Marin are kids of the family that moves into the basement. They have a cousin who comes with a car to the neighborhood, I think a Cadillac, and offers the kids a ride around the neighborhood. And then the police show up, and the kids jump out of the car, and the cousin speeds off and crashes it into a telephone pole or something, and the police arrest him. So again, another example of trying to get out, but unable to. Marin has a boyfriend, she says, in Puerto Rico, and Marin's very nice, talks about her dreams of living in Chicago, also getting out. She confides in Lucy and Rachel and Esperanza girl things about what to do when you have too much facial hair and things like that. During the day, she babysits. At night, she goes outside with the radio and dances and smokes and flirts with the boys that come by. So she's a very excited, energizing person. Yes. Esperanza talks about how people are afraid to come into her neighborhood, but he says those people are those who don't know any better. And so she doesn't feel at all at unease. She feels perfectly at ease within her neighborhood. She feels no fear really within her neighborhood. But then she recognizes the fact that when she goes to a non-Chicano neighborhood, that she does feel fear. And so there's some sort of, I think, commentary about what home means. Is there some safety in that concept, even though maybe those other neighborhoods that Esperanza goes to aren't really scary, but simply because it's not her neighborhood, it might make her feel so. The book talks about other people in the neighborhood. The Vargas kids are always told, everyone's told to stay away from the Vargas kids. I think there are 10 Vargas kids, and there's one mother. The father has left, and the mother's tried so hard. She's a good mother and tries so hard to keep them in line, but can't. At the beginning, the neighborhood and the community tries to also be parents and help the kids and tell them when they're doing the wrong things, as you may have experienced in your lives. And even there's the point again where another kid, Angel Vargas, falls, and he dies. And the lack of concern from the community for Angel's death is worth taking note, because what once was a community that was tight-knit and all that, suddenly with the Vargas kids anyways, they just stop ignoring them. They do ignore them. They don't stop ignoring them. Alicia is another person in the neighborhood. whose mother died, um, and I forget how. Um, but so she's alone with her father, is trying to go to college, is trying to take care of the rest of the family and has to make like lunches and things. Also takes care of her father as best she can. And her father has a real demeaning attitude towards women and what they should and should not do. And he's more concerned with her taking care of the family and making food than going to college, though she wants to get out as well. There's a nice little comment here about the inner city and that Esperanza makes, and she talks about how the city doesn't have enough sky. And I love that concept as well. Like when she looks up and she sees all the buildings that kind of hold us in, and she doesn't see enough sky that would allow her to fly, to allow her to get out and express herself more. Um, and she kind of thinks she makes a connection with a boy named Darius, who everyone seems to like. And they're sitting around looking at the clouds, and Darius refers to one of the clouds as God, while the other kids are coming up with like stupid names for the clouds. Esperanza uses scientific names like cumulus and whatever, and I think Lucy or Rachel come up with real names like that's Ted and that's Sam or whatever. But Darius is the one that kind of takes it a little deeper, and Esperanza thinks that she might be able to make a connection with Darius, someone who thinks about things at a deeper level, at a more emotional, philosophical level. But he leaves, and the discussion and it kind of goes into amongst the girls into playful insults of each other. But one of them calls Esperanza fat and ugly, and you're not really sure if this really affects her in a negative way or if she likes the playful insults. But still, this seems to be a common theme that people say about her, and that she has about her own identity. Somewhere they get a pair of high heels, the girls do. I think someone throws them away or something. And they're amazed that once they put it on, the transformation in their legs, and they think they have women's legs or adult legs. And they start walking around the neighborhood in them, and people stop and warn them, like, don't do this. Don't look like this in this neighborhood. And they get some sexual innuendo comments from people who are driving by, even yelling rude things out at these girls. And by the way, these girls are like 12 or 13 or something like that. So when they get home, and so they run away from some of these comments, and they get home and they hide the high heels. But Lucy and Rachel's mom finds them and throws them away, and they're all glad that they got thrown away. And this might be symbolic of like this lack of desire to grow up, like, when you're young, you kind of want to grow up and be an adult. And then when you realize some of the dangers out there, the unsafe spaces of being an adult, then maybe sometimes you want to stay where you are. Esperanza asks her mother if she could write a note so she could eat lunch at the school they go to. Usually Esperanza walks home for lunch, but she's always been, for some reason, jealous of those who get to stay and eat in the lunchroom. Usually they couldn't, Esperanza's family couldn't afford to like give her money to buy lunch, but they were going to pack a lunch, and the lunch that Esperanza's mother packed for her was a rice sandwich because they couldn't really afford meat. So when she brought the note to the head nun of the school, the nun was like, oh, this isn't a real note. Your mom didn't write this. You live in these projects over here, which was not the truth. And so you're going to have to walk home for lunch still. And so even though she got to eat lunch in the lunchroom that day, she was so embarrassed about what people thought of her that she really did not enjoy it. The family goes to a cousin's baptism, and her mom, Esperanza's mom, buys her this whole outfit, except new pairs of shoes. And so Esperanza is kind of ashamed that she has these white and brown saddle shoes that she has to wear. And there's the party afterwards, and I think one of the uncles or something asks Esperanza to dance, and she doesn't want to because she's so embarrassed by her shoes. But she does, and everyone stops and watches them dance, and suddenly she's like a star. And this is kind of like one of those examples of maybe there's something that happens in your life where you think about it in worse ways than what anyone else does. And this is one of those examples of that, of, Esperanza feeling that she's not worthy of something, but everyone else thinking that she is. Back in the neighborhood, there's conversations about women's hips. One of the girls, Lucy or Rachel, talk about how um, having women's hips are good to rest a child on while you're cooking in the kitchen. And like the others are like, oh no, that's not what we're about. But then they're like jumping rope, and one of the girls starts reciting children's rhymes, and Esperanza doesn't feel anymore like she fits with them because they're so childish and so conventional, and they don't think about things in new and exciting ways. They are stuck in this past of what a woman or what a girl is supposed to do. Esperanza is encouraged and kind of told to get a summer job, and that all she has to do to get this one job that an aunt knows about is to go there and lie about her age. And again, this concept of lying to get something that you should deserve or you've earned, is something that's interesting. But she does it. She lies, and she gets this job in a photo finishing store. And you might not even know what this is, but people used to take photographs on a camera, and you'd have to take it to a store to get them developed, and then someone had to put the negatives together with the photographs, and that's what Esperanza's job was. And so she enjoyed the job, but she had trouble with the social aspects of it. Like, she didn't know if she was supposed to sit down, or could she sit down, and was she supposed to stand up, or could she go to the bathroom and things like that. So she didn't quite understand and had trouble with, until she met, there was an older man, an Oriental man, who became her friend. And she thought this was nice to have someone to talk to, especially at lunch. And then I think the man said something like, "Oh, it's my birthday. Why don't you give me a kiss on my cheek?" And so as Esperanza leaned in to give the man a kiss on the cheek, the man turned his head and kissed her full force on the mouth. And that kind of turned her against him. Esperanza's father says that his father, or Esperanza's grandfather, has died, and he must go to Mexico. And there's really a moment here where Esperanza realizes how much she owes to her father. We haven't heard much about her father, who works really hard and provides for the family, but Esperanza can't imagine living without her father. She talks about one of her aunts, Lupe, who was, when she was younger, was a great swimmer and all that, but now is old and blind. And, as you're reading this, you kind of get the idea of like one of those old mythology seers who can see things even though she can't physically see. This is what Lupe is, really. And Esperanza would bring books from the library and read to her. She really liked Lupe. And one day she read a poem that she wrote to Lupe. And Lupe says, "Keep writing, it'll keep you free." And I love that too, this concept of self-expression that keeps you free. It keeps your mind sharp and keeps you who you are, develops who you are. This self-expression again, and we'll get to this probably a little bit later. But just before Lupe dies, Esperanza and the girls are playing a game about trying to impersonate someone in the neighborhood, and one of them picks Lupe and makes fun of her, like harshly, and they all laugh about it. And Esperanza's afraid that she's going to go to hell because she did that, because Esperanza died the next day. Esperanza goes to a fortune teller to get her future told, and this is for me, it's kind of a funny scene, because the fortune teller is like all serious, but Esperanza really isn't really participating. Like, there's a glass of water, and the fortune teller asks Esperanza, "What do you see?" And she says, "Water." When she's thinking about other things and being more interested by other things going on in the room than about what the fortune teller is saying. But finally, the fortune teller puts out some tarot cards and says, "I see jealousy, sorrow, and luxury in your future." And Esperanza says, "Well, what about a house? Do you see a house?" And the fortune teller says, "I see a house of the heart," which disappoints Esperanza because she keeps thinking about the dream house that she wants to live in. There's quite a small little story here about a guy named Geraldo that we don't know his last name. Geraldo is friends with, I forget if it's Alicia or someone else, but um, Geraldo gets into a car accident and dies, and nobody knows his last name. And again, the importance of names and identity is here. And Esperanza thinks about the family back in Mexico who suddenly will not hear from Geraldo and wonders if they will ever wonder what has become of him and who would ever tell them. And so has Geraldo disappeared with his identity, even though no one really knew him here. There's another person in the neighborhood named Ruthie who is an adult but acts like a children and prefers to hang out with children. And Ruthie might be not all there mentally. One day, Esperanza reads her a passage from Through the Looking Glass, Alice in Wonderland and stuff like that. And it so moves Ruthie, but the only way that she can explain how happy she is to tell Esperanza that she has nice teeth. Another person in the neighborhood is Earl, who stays in his house. He fixes things like jukeboxes and TVs and things. Everyone thinks he's married, but everyone has a different description of who his wife is, which probably means he has a lot of women coming in and out of his place. And look, all of these individuals in the neighborhood on Mango Street, I think, just are important to show where different people are in their lives and how they have dealt with the challenges of life and what they want. There's a boy that Esperanza kind of fancies her first crush. His name is Sire, but Sire has a girlfriend named Lois, and Lois is what I think Esperanza's father says, that she's one of the girls that goes into alleys, right? Where, what might happen in an alley. But still, this doesn't stop Esperanza from dreaming of what it would be like to be in the arms of a boy, or specifically in the arms of Sire. And but that's probably not going to happen. She notices the trees in her yard, Esperanza, and thinks that they share something. They share a secret strength and a secret anger about where they are. But she finds inspiration in the trees in her yard, because no matter what's trying to hold the trees down, whether it be concrete or the lack of sun or whatever, they seem to keep growing higher and higher. And this is inspirational to Esperanza, that maybe she can do the same thing. There's another woman in the neighborhood they call Mamacita, who refuses to assimilate into American culture. She's fat and sits around, but Esperanza thinks she's beautiful. She refuses to learn English, Mamacita. She loves Mexico and wants to go back to Mexico, and so therefore will only speak Spanish. But she is so disappointed in what the world is like in America, and disappointed in her son, who also learns English, and tears that last connection to what the world that she used to know was like. There's another girl named Rafaela, who's young and beautiful and married. Once a week, I think, Rafaela's husband, has a poker game, and because he's so afraid that Rafaela is going to escape and get out, he locks her up in her bedroom, and the only thing that Rafaela can do is hang out of the top floor. And she asks the girls to go buy her some papaya juice or some coconut juice or whatever, and She throws the money out of the window. They go buy the juice and they bring it back, and she brings up the juice on a clothesline, a clothespin, or whatever. But what she'd really rather be doing is going out to the bar and dancing and living her life and being exciting and energized and all those things. But she's not allowed to do that, and she's again trapped in this room by her husband. Sally is another young girl who comes in about the same age of Esperanza. She's very beautiful. She wears makeup and all that, but she has a horrible father. Her father thinks the world is dangerous, thinks boys are dangerous, and will not let her out, and also beats her. We haven't got, yeah, that's at the bottom here. But Sally shares with Esperanza that she doesn't want to go home. And it's because her father beats her. And we'll get to more of that in a minute. There's another girl that moves in, Minerva. She's only 2 years older than Esperanza, but she's already married with 2 children. And so she kind of is stuck into that life as well. But sometimes Esperanza and Minerva get together and they write poems together. So there's some depth in Minerva and how she sees herself in the world as well. Back to this concept of a house. They used to go to the house where their father worked, Esperanza and the family, and it's a beautiful house and all of that. But Esperanza stopped going because she said that she was sick of looking at things that she knows she could never have. But yet she still kept dreaming of the house, and she says if she ever gets a big house out in the suburbs or whatever, she won't forget where she came from. And if she sees bums on the street, she'll invite them in and let them live in the attic. And so people will say, what's in the attic? Oh, just the bums in the attic. And I love that turn of phrase as well. Yes. She thinks of herself as ugly, Esperanza. She still does. So she's not sure if a man will ever fall in love with her, but she doesn't really want a man to take her away. She doesn't want to be the person like all the people that we've talked about before that somehow get married and get taken away and yet still are held in the prison of what the man wants them to do. She says she wants to live a life where she can leave the table like a man, where she doesn't have to ask anyone's permission and she doesn't have to push her chair back. She can just do as she pleases. And that's what she wants. She has a conversation with her mother, and her mother is very frustrated with her life as well. And she knows that she can do so many things. Her mother's very talented. She can fix things and cook things and do all of these things. But yet Esperanza notes that she doesn't know how to use the subway. And again, this idea of trying to get out, of trying to move out into the world, and yet the mother doesn't even have the skills to use the subway to do that. But the mother is very worldly. She knows there's a world out there. There's one scene where she's singing along to an opera a record that she has borrowed from the library. And she reminisces about what she was like when she was growing up. And she warns and tells Esperanza, don't be like me when I was younger. Take care of yourself. Don't rely on other people. Almost done. So Sally, we know Sally's father beats her, and one day it gets really bad, so Sally comes to live with Esperanza and her family, but later that night the father shows up and is crying and apologizing and all that, and so Sally agrees to come home. It's all right for a little bit, but Sally does something to upset him, and he beats her so bad that she misses 2 days of school. Yeah. So that's a sad thing. One family has a pet monkey that they take to an empty lot, which has ended up being like a garbage dump. People would dump things, and so, but the kids would go to this lot and look for little trinkets or prizes or treasures or whatever. So Esperanza's out with the boys exploring around, but Sally is kind of acting all grown up off to the side. One of the boys steals her keys, and she's like, give them back. And he says, you'll have to kiss all the boys here before we give you your keys back. And she's like, okay. So they go behind someplace and do whatever they're doing. And Esperanza is angry about this and scared about this. And she's like, this got to stop. And so she goes and tells the mother of one of the boys, and the mother doesn't care what's going on. And so Esperanza finds a brick and goes up to the boys and threatens the boys with the brick. But everyone laughs at her, including Sally. And so she runs away. Esperanza does and hides for a little bit. But then when she gets out of her hiding place, she looks around like at the lot or whatever, and things to her look differently. This is kind of symbolic of, her growing up, her maturing. We also hear about this time of a day when Esperanza was sexually assaulted by a group of white boys at a fair, I think it was. We don't really know exactly what happened. She doesn't really tell us the details, Esperanza, but she just says that it was not like what she ever has seen or has been told what sex is like. All she remembers really is one of the white boys whispering in her ear, "I love you, Spanish girl," while he's doing whatever he was doing. And so Esperanza begins to blame all women for not being truthful about what sex is about, and maybe for not standing up for their own power. Sally, in the meantime, gets married to a much older man who has to take her to another state because Sally is not yet 14 years old, and she has to take him. So they have to go to another state where it's legal for someone under 14 to get married. Sally says she's happy because the man gives her money, but she's not allowed to go out or talk on the phone or go to the movies or anything like that. So she too is still kept in a prison. Lucy and Rachel's little sister, baby sister, dies. And so there's a big funeral out in the yard of Lucy and Rachel's house. 3 aunts of hers show up and who see Esperanza and say, "Oh, you're special and beautiful, and you're going to go far, and you have one wish." And so silently, Esperanza makes a wish. And one of the women afterwards pulls her aside and said, "Well, you have to promise to come back after you get out." So the woman knew what the wish was. And so that's kind of interesting and fun. And again, the 3 aunts might be representing, like, in Greek mythology, there's like the 3 witches or seers or whatever, who might see the future, If you remember Alicia from early on, who was in college and all that, she has a home in Esmeralda. Have I been calling her the wrong name this whole time? Esperanza is jealous of her for having a home, because the home that the family has, Esperanza has in Mango Street, she doesn't want to have that as the home. She doesn't want to be known as being from Mango Street. She kind of just doesn't want to say that living a year at this place doesn't mean that this is their home. She talks about what her dream house should be again, and she talks about it being picturesque and not belonging to a man, and that there are flowers everywhere, and there's a front porch, and that it's in a safe place, and then it's very clean. And I love how she says, you can see here in the slide, it should be as clean as paper before a poem. Esperanza realizes that she has identified herself as a storyteller. She likes to tell these stories of the people that she has met. She's also a girl who did not want to belong. But then she realizes that of all the places where she's lived, the only place that she remembers the name of is the house on Mango Street. And that this is, whether it be a good thing or a bad thing, or a good place or a bad place, or something that she was happy or sad, it has made an indelible mark on who she is, Mango Street. And so she talks about making sure and committing that if she ever does get out, she will definitely come back to the house on Mango Street. And that's the end. So again, think of issues like race and identity and belonging, and how you get to be who you are. certainly the issue of poverty and the American dream, what the dream means, whether it be the Statue of Liberty or a house or finding out who you are, or getting out. And there's this excitement about, is there something else out there? And you saw so many people in this book thinking about there must be something else out there, but never being able to get out, whether it being a flaw in the culture, society, or a flaw in themselves. Um, so I'm not sure what you think. It'd be interesting in your analysis to be able to think about if you think she gets out or not. So I enjoy it. I look forward to seeing what you come up with about this book, and email me with any questions. But enjoy, and I'll see you next time.